Today is 9/11. It's the 18th anniversary of that date in 2001, and so I'm just going to read a few things, and I hope we'll be able to reflect on this as we have our moment of silence. So, and I have to say, this is taken from the Day's editorial this morning and kind of paraphrased. At 8:46 on the morning of September 11th, 2001, a passenger airliner hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and at 9:03, a second passenger jet hit the South Tower. 90 minutes later, both towers collapsed. At 9:37 that morning, another hijacked airline slammed into the Pentagon, and at 10:03, a fourth plane, its apparent target, the White House, crashed into a southern Pennsylvania field, forced down by the passengers who learned their nation was under attack. During those September 11th attacks, 2,977 people were killed and more than 6,000 others were injured, including first responders, hundreds of them. 161 Connecticut men and women with ties to Connecticut died on that day as well. Since then, more people have sickened and died of illnesses caused by exposure to the dust from that site, continuing to raise the number of people who've died or were injured in this event. And so if we'll all rise and have a moment of silence, I'm going to ask if we can pause and honor the memory of these individuals and their loved ones. Thank you. Representative Adams, would you please lead us in the pledge? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on June 12th. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Adams, is there a second? Representative Chase? So we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on those minutes? I know I saw one typo in Dr. Grenier's name, which can easily be fixed. So
typos aren't really,
okay.
That's not correct.
There you go. Representative Katowski?
Would asking about status be not appropriate at this point? Like, there's some things in these minutes that I was wondering wondering about an update.
Oh, no.
Or is that not now?
You're just
Okay.
approving minutes right now. You'll do updates later.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some updates that are requested in the back. I did notice that when I read them. And so seeing no other comments on this, did we rectify the
attendance.
the attendance? Okay, good. Just checking. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes of our June 12th meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, those minutes are approved by consensus. Thank you. So the next item is citizens' petitions, and this is the portion of our agenda where the RTM welcomes comments from citizens. Each presentation should be limited to 10 minutes or less, and citizens should, if possible, submit written comments as well. Presentations should be limited to matters pertinent to Groton, and the moderator or members through me shall ask questions only in order to clarify the speaker's presentation. Responses may be given by the moderator and or by the town manager, and citizens should make their presentations from the lectern over there and state their name and address for the record. I don't believe we have anyone signed up. No. So we'll move on.
Unless there's somebody else here.
So in terms of communications, I have had communications from several members that they wouldn't be able to join us tonight. Representative Whitehouse, Newsom, Stevenson, Casper, Irma Streeter and Jim Streeter, Marshall, Bailey, Pasqualini, and Massett are unable to make it tonight. And I also wanted to note the resignation of Representative Monahan, who did step down this summer. And I would like to welcome aboard two new members. We have Representative Jill Rusk from District 3 joining us for the first time, I believe, and Representative Jean Baker from District 6. So welcome aboard. Reps- All right. And then I had one other thing I wanted to note, which maybe someone else will mention, but there is going to be a Groton Plastic Reduction Public Forum on September 26th here in the Senior Center, and it will be at 6 to 8:30 with presentations at 6 and 7:30. And so this seems like it's going to be pretty interesting if you want to go. Representative Katowski, did you have a communication?
I have a communication from Herma Clark on Mystic Oral School Road. And she got in touch with me because, of course, no one knows what's going on with Mystic Oral School. And I contacted the mayor, and the mayor was kind enough to send a letter to me, so we gave her some information. And I think the town manager was also copied on it, and I sent information to all my other RTM representatives from District 5 as well.
Thank you.
Did you share that with the rest of us?
Yeah, do you want to share that communication? Or at least the gist of it, maybe?
The town of Groton has been working with the state of Connecticut to find a new use for the Access Mystic Educational Center. A preferred developer has been selected based on preliminary plans for the site, which includes residential, mixed use, and the potential for town use of the Pratt Building. The state agencies are working to facilitate the sale of the property at their level. And on the local level, in the meantime, the town is readying for when the state disposes of the property.
Thank you. Any other communications? Representative Rogers?
Is that working?
It'll work. Keep talking.
Okay. I will talk loudly in the meantime. I received communication from one of my District 6 constituents, Charles Perini of 168 High Street. He organized a community betterment project, a beautification project on the stairs that lead from Pearl Street up to Bank Street. And about 20 neighbors got together in August, and we cleared, actually the town helped clear the brush and then paint the stair railings, which were in pretty bad disrepair. And he communicated to me at the project how appreciative he was of the town, and specifically Mr. Burt being receptive to the idea and supplying the supplies necessary for us to paint the stairs. He's interested in having this be an ongoing annual project for District 6 residents, and I have before and after photos if anyone cares to see them, but it's a great way for District 6 to shine a little brighter.
If you want to send those photos, I can attach them to the minutes, and it'll be forever in the history.
Great, I will do that.
All right. Seeing no more communications, we do have a presentation tonight from Dave Aldrich, who's kindly agreed to come and speak to us. He's the Executive Director of the Southeastern Connecticut Regional Resource Recovery Authority, which is sometimes called SCARA. Probably easier to say SCARA than to remember the name. So,
Very good.
hi, Dave. And Becky is with him.
Yeah, with me tonight is Becky Chapman, who is the Office Manager and Outreach Coordinator for SCARA. And we're here to talk trash. And since trash talking is usually two ways, I'd encourage any questions you have as I go along. So it's interactive. Start off real quickly, who's SCARA? We're an authority that was formed by the 12 towns in the map that you see on the screen. We were formed in 1987 in response to statutes that several years earlier Connecticut passed to close the landfills in the state. And at that time they had opted to go to what at that time were new technologies, which are waste to energy plants. So our authority was actually formed to finance the waste to energy plant that is currently in Preston. That plant opened in 1992. It takes in about 700 tons of waste a day. That translates to about 263,000 tons of trash a year. It's incinerated. It's run through some boilers, which runs a steam turbine, which in course generates 18.4 megawatts of electricity a year, which is enough to power about 10,000 houses. When the plant was still in the indenture, the bonds were still active, part of the indenture was we entered into a very lucrative, what turned out to be a very lucrative contract with the electrical company for the sale of the electricity that we produced. And we were able to take some of the proceeds from that and invest it in reserves, which currently allows us to do a lot more than just handle the trash. So we've expanded our operations to include a lot of recycling services, which I'll talk about later. And currently, we actually subsidize the trash for all of our towns. Right now, our towns are paying $58 a ton for the disposal of trash. That is and has been the lowest in the state for about 15 years. And we keep it at that level. We're actually paying closer to $84 a ton, so we're actually keeping that price down. So part of what we have in reserves we've been using to keep the town budgets in line as best we can. As we go along, you'll see that a lot of what we have is static. We don't own the plant anymore. It reverted to Covanta, who operates it. So our funds are now invested, and we actually have done very well with that, but it is a limited amount of money. So our tasks going forward are to how can we do what we do better for less money, and we'll get into some of the ways that we can do that. When we look at solid waste, we usually look at a waste management hierarchy, which is the preferred method for dealing with things from an environmental perspective. And you'll find as I talk along that while the finances are very important, the environmental impacts are paramount. So the first thing at the top, which is most preferred, is source reduction and reuse. And right now, with what's going on in marketplaces, this is something we're really talking a lot about. So source reduction, that's an easy one. You use less stuff, all right? And you have automatic savings with that. The reuse is where you take an item and repurpose it, reuse it in its current form. Good examples would be taking clothing to Goodwill. Food banks would be another real good example of that. Next on the hierarchy is recycling and composting, and that's where we take an item and we remanufacture it into something different. We could take a water bottle and remanufacture it into another water bottle. We could take it and turn it into a park bench. In the case of composting, which is something we're looking at now, you take food waste, you compost it, and you come up with a good soil amendment that can replace fertilizers and give you a kind of a circular economy. So it's just another way that you're changing what you had, but you're using it for a beneficial use. Next down the list would be energy recovery, and that's the waste to energy plant. And it is kind of sort of considered to be a good energy recovery. I mean, the energy recovery is great, but it's not recycling because what you put in there ends up being incinerated and turned to ash, and it's not being reused. So those items, say if plastic water bottles are going in there and they're being burned, what that means is if you want another plastic water bottle, you either have to recycle another one or you got to drill for more oil because that's where they come from. At the bottom is treatment and disposal, which would be landfilling. And currently there are no municipal waste landfills open in Connecticut. The last one closed a couple of years ago. Next slide. So the state of solid waste today is that disposal is constrained. You know, we went to waste to energy plants, the whole state did, but the capacity that we have in those plants hasn't kept up with demand, and currently we have about a 500,000 ton a year shortfall. So we're actually shipping that product out of state to landfills in other states. Very costly, both in dollars and in the impact on the environment with greenhouse gases, because every time you move something on a truck, you've got greenhouse gas impact. It's not just a Connecticut problem. Can you just back up a sec? The other way. There you go, thank you. It's a regional problem. the shortfall is in all of New England. Just last year, 2 landfills closed in Massachusetts, which would have been another 500,000 ton shortfall. So that's causing us, when we ship out of state, recently the Mira plant in Hartford had mechanical problems, and they were shipping things as far as Virginia and out into the Midwest. So very costly. That's it for that one, thanks. So the state of recycling markets today, there's been a lot of talk about this. About 2 years ago, China started tightening its controls over recycling. Probably 60% of everything that we recycle, we were shipping overseas to China. A couple of things happened. One, their economy developed to the point that their consumer economy developed to the point that they started generating a lot of their own recyclable material. So they didn't need ours as much to do the manufacturing that they were doing. Secondly, what we sent over there is not very clean. There was a lot of trash in it. And the third thing that happened is they realized that they were experiencing some really difficult environmental issues, and they looked at this flow of trash coming into the country as one of the things that was causing a lot of the problems. So they turned around, they started inspecting things a lot more. In 2016, in the beginning of 2018, they actually put in place new standards for purity. So a bale of plastic that goes, say, from us over to China would have to be 99.6% pure. So if you have a 2,000-pound bale of plastic that's run through our systems, and we'll take a look at how the systems work, and you'll see how impossible this is. Literally, if you have half a dozen tin cans in there, it's rejected out of 2,000 pounds of waste. So what's happening, what has happened is there's been a huge drop in recycling commodity values. We don't have the capacity to do it here. We started shipping it to Indonesia, to India, some other, I think that Taiwan got a bunch of it. Their capacity was nowhere near what we were shipping them. We overwhelmed them, and they've all shut it off. So right now, if we want to recycle product, we have to do it within our own borders. So the downside is we've got a backup product because the infrastructure isn't there. When we decided to let China do it all, we shut down all of our mills. That's compounded by the fact that the machinery in the mills today that does the recycling work is all produced overseas. So that's a problem. And then thirdly, with the glut, the capacity we did have, the manufacturers, because of supply and demand, aren't giving any money out to do it at all. So the end result of this is that a ton of what we would call a ton of scare recyclables, which is just a mix of everything that comes through our mixed recycling stream, the blue carts and everything, dropped in value by about 80% since the beginning of 2017. So the market's very, very much upside down. The good news is that there is onshoring of capacity. There is investment happening here. Actually, some of the major companies in China that can't process our stuff over there are coming over and buying up our factories and opening them up to process it here. And I think this year they've announced 16 paper mills and 9 plastic mills to start processing. So the hope is, and I'm an optimist in all this, the hope is that in 2 or 3 years when these start coming online, we're going to see the markets improve and the economics of recycling is going to return, maybe not to where it was, but better than it is now, we'll say. Next. So why is it important to recycle? First and foremost, it's efficient use of our natural resources. And you can see here some statistics just on paper. It's less expensive to recycle used materials. Usually, if in the case of plastics, if the price of oil goes down, it can actually cost more to recycle. But one thing I would say relative to the expenses, it's always more expensive from an environmental perspective than using raw materials. And then again, no landfills in Connecticut. So, marine debris, iconic cover that was on last June, I think it was, National Geographic, really advertising the plight of plastics in the environment, and particularly in our oceans. I love that picture. Next one. So what's the impact on our oceans? The 5 main ocean gyres, which are like large, massive eddies in our seas, are collecting all of this plastic. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is east of Hawaii, is the largest, and they estimate that to be twice the size of Texas. But what you see is actually misleading, because what happens to plastic is it doesn't actually break down, but it breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. The erosion from the sun, the salt water, the action of the tides breaks it down, and you end up with microplastics, which extend virtually everywhere in the oceans. And that's being ingested by sea life and then by us when we go out for a nice fish dinner. Next. So, some 18 billion pounds of plastic waste flows. These are all slides from our friends at the National Geographic. Flows into the oceans every year from coastal regions, the equivalent of a 5-pound grocery bag of plastic on every foot of every shoreline around the world. It's a lot. Most of it is actually coming from countries in Asia, but it's a problem everywhere. Our waste from the East Coast and the waste from Western Europe is floating north, and there's a large gyre off the coast of Greenland up in the Arctic that's several hundred miles across. So we have our problems too. Next, 40% of the plastic produced is packaging that's used just once and then discarded. So what we're talking about are clamshells, we're talking water bottles, we're talking plastic cups and lids, we're talking straws, we're talking when you order something from Amazon, whatever the packing material is that's in there, that's really just used one time. They say that a useful life of a plastic shopping bag is 15 minutes. Now everybody can argue, okay, well when I walk my dog I use it, but realistically most of them it's 15 minutes. And the problem at the end of the day is most of these plastics last over 400 years in the environment. So you collect it, you use it for a few minutes, and then if you don't recycle it, it's a problem. And it could last, if it gets into the environment, for a very, very long time. Next. Shoppers in the United States use almost 1 bag per day. Shoppers in Denmark use an average of 4 plastic bags a year, which is why I think that the bag bans have become prevalent. By the way, these bags that we handed out, I don't know about you, when I go to the store, I always forget it, but those things actually fold up into the little corner like this. So I keep one in my backpack and keep it in your handbag, so I never remember to put them back in my car. So that was the idea of these things at any rate. Next slide. This is one that talks about the proliferation of plastics, and it's really, to me, it's one of the most shocking statistics, is that nearly half of all the plastic ever manufactured has been made in the last 19 years. And if you look at the trajectory, it's going up and up and up and up and up. And we recycle somewhere in the neighborhood of 9% of the plastic that we use in this country. Go ahead. Less than a fifth is plastic recycled globally. Like I said, we're 9%. China's actually at 25%. Eastern Europe, who does a very, very good job, they're at 30%. So this is a global problem. So nearly 1 million plastic beverage bottles are sold every minute around the world. In 2015, Americans purchased about 346 bottles per person. 111 billion plastic beverage bottles in all. Pretty stunning when you think about it. So here you are. They last 450 years. I think that's a million per minute, is it? Worldwide. 30% recycled. And Yeah, bottled water requires up to 2,000 times the amount of energy to produce and distribute than does tap water. So reusable water jugs are a pretty good idea. Next. 8% of the oil's production is used to make plastic and power the manufacturing for it. And that's expected to go up to 20% in the next 30 years. So that's why I think we're starting to hear a lot more about this. This is why I think our legislature acted. I think that municipalities, and I know there's a lot of talk here, you know, they've taken the forefront of this thing, and I think it got to be such enough noise that a lot of the retailers who were fighting this said, you know what, we're done fighting this. We're going to go the route that a couple of our local grocery stores did here and say, okay, we're going to embrace it. And they went ahead and banned the bags to begin with, not even waiting for the state, because our ban actually for the state goes in 2 years. They're going to tax it in between, but I'm not going to get into that conversation. Here's the next one. This is something that's interesting. This was last summer we saw this. That's a Doritos bag that was collected on the Outer Banks of North Carolina in an annual beach cleanup. And the guy that picked it up looked at it and he said, this doesn't look like my Doritos bag. This is kind of weird. Flipped it over. The production date in the back was 1979. So that thing's been floating around for 40 years. Next. So what's Connecticut doing? A few things. In 2016, they passed a comprehensive material management strategy. That strategy basically is to promote reuse, reuse, and recycling and try to reduce the amount of waste that we're producing down to match that capacity that we have in the waste-to-energy plant. So essentially, they're looking to make improvements in all the other things that we do to make up for that 500,000 tons a year that we export. Challenged municipalities to increase recycling diversion rate to 60%, improve performance of municipal recycling programs, improving recycling and waste technologies, and of course all of this was before China put their ban in place and threw the whole market upside down. So we have been, I would say, less than successful since that was passed in 2016. The good news was that in 2019, this year they passed the plastic ban. It's the first real tangible thing that we've seen done. They joined several other states that have done it. There's even talk in Washington about that. And the next step to this, there are a couple of things that you're likely to see being bannered about in Hartford and in Washington. One is considering producer responsibility legislation for packaging. That's where the people that make the packaging are responsible for the end of life. So they have to either build in, recycle capabilities to it. It needs to be something that breaks down quicker in the environment. Biodegradable is the term that they use, which sounds great, but I'd be real careful about when you see something that's biodegradable, you think, oh, that's great. Well, it may not be biodegradable in salt water, or it may be only biodegradable in salt water. So, depending on the chemistry of what they make, it may or may not be biodegradable. It's certainly not in all circumstances. So they're looking at that. Canada has actually instituted this. It's been brought up year after year by DEEP up in Hartford. It's likely to get more attention. And I think just like happened with the retailers and our plastic bags, the large manufacturers, and we're talking big oil like Chevron, we're talking big bottlers like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, they're starting to see, there's enough public swell here that we've got to start doing some things. And know it or not, they're actually the money behind Keep America Beautiful, the Plastics Council. That's all big corporate money. And it's all the guys that are making this stuff. So kind of an interesting little twist and all of that. Next. So here's a question. Does anybody know who owns the intellectual property there, the 3 arrows? I can tell you the answer is nobody. That's out in the open domain, which means the problem with that is anybody is producing something, they can put that on their package. and there's nothing to say that it means anything other than they put it on their package. Next. So, acceptable recycling items. This is in the mixed recycling. We've got a lot of information that we've put out lately. We've been distributing refrigerator magnets. We've got stickers for recycle bins we've put out. We've got a lot of pamphlets that we've been distributing. We worked at length with Willimantic Waste Paper, who actually is the company that handles all of our mixed recycling. They do the sortation of it, and looked at the products and really tried to understand what should and what shouldn't go in the bin. And it's really confusing. We used to separate recyclables. Back in the early 90s, we decided, well, we want to get more recyclables, so we're going to combine them all into one bin. So you put your paper, your cardboard, your plastic, glass, it all goes in the same thing. And then companies like Willimantic Waste will sort it out. Well, the problem with that, number one, is that glass breaks, for one. A lot of these things aren't necessarily clean. They get mixed up. If you've got cans that still have liquid in it, comes in contact with paper or cardboard, it makes the paper cardboard recyclable. So the system we set up really kind of doomed a lot of the product that we send through there. And I think that we shot ourselves in the foot years ago where we basically said, get it all into your recycle bin. And in fact, a lot of things that people recycle are more problems in the system than they are helpful. One of the big misnomers is you see a little triangle with a number in the middle of it, and that's recyclable. No, it's not. All that means is this is the resin that this item is made out of. Now, it depends on what form that is in to say, can it be recycled through our system or can it? You know, if it's a water bottle, you bet. Here's a real good one. If it's a water bottle cap, does that go through the system? By itself, it won't. It's too small. If it's on the bottle, it will. So it's complicated. There are a lot of things. One of the things, we put out our information, and we put it on, I think it was the Ledger Forum. And one thing we've learned is anything you put in a forum, man, you get response really, really fast. And we put it out there, and one of the items that said do not recycle was shredded paper. We must have gotten 200 calls the first week. Like, what are you talking about? Well, paper itself is recyclable. But once it's shredded, it goes in the facility, it all goes airborne. And all it does is come down and contaminates everything else that you're baling. And then you don't reach that 99.6% purity because paper's in it. So again, it's complicated. So the message we're sending now is keep it simple. You know, as long as we get all of the right things, we're going to be way ahead of the game. I mean, we only recycle, 30% of the water bottles, and that's the most ubiquitous recyclable item I can think of, you know? So what's happened to the other 70%? If we just got all the water bottles in and we're good at it, our recycling numbers would be through the roof. Yeah, next. Recycling loop. This kind of goes through the evolution of recycling. So you put it in your cart, it's taken to a material recovery facility, your MRF we call them, that's Willimantic Waste. The MRF sorts it and separates it out into the different plastic resins and the different fiber contents, so you'll have different kinds of paper, different kinds of cardboard. The next it says it goes, the processors turn it into a new commodity. And actually what's missing in our infrastructure is kind of in between those two. Because you take the recyclable content, say it's PET bottles, you have a bale of PET, that goes to a facility that pre-processes it, it'll shred it up, it'll clean it, it'll melt it down, and it turns into plastic pellets, and those plastic pellets are what the manufacturers actually make stuff out of. If we had the ability to make those pellets in the United States, China would be buying them from us all day long. That's what they're looking for, and that's what we don't have. So then, after that, people buy stuff, and it goes back into the loop again. So this is, it's not trash. That's a recycle facility. This one, I believe, is in Maine. It's not ours. But we'll run through, and it'll give you an idea of the difficulty that we run into with trying to get this stuff sorted. So it comes in, trucks dump it, they go over a scale, they dump it in a big tipping floor. We call it tipping floor and tipping fees because the truck tips, so makes sense. Front loader will take it, it'll dump it into a hopper, which then puts it onto a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt runs along. The first thing it goes through are these they call them screens. They have these spindles on them that flip around, and what ends up happening is that paper and cardboard float up on top of it, and they're separated just wide enough that bottles, cans, and little stuff fall down between them. But if you can see there, what ends up happening is the plastic gets wrapped around them. That's why we say never put plastic bags or what we call tanglers, thank you, in there, because they fill that space up, and everything goes right over the top along with cardboard. Completely. So here you can see how they fill in between. So all the things that would have fallen through into another sort just go right up with the paper. They actually shut the facility down about 4 times a day and send people in there with X-Acto knives to cut it out. And I can tell you, I wouldn't want to climb into that machine. But what ends up happening is there are various sortation methods that move along, and either through air jets, optical sorters, hand picking, a lot of it, they'll sort it into the various commodities. Magnets, and it's kind of cool. They have a magnet that will pull the steel, and then they have an eddy current which will temporarily magnetize aluminum, and it'll pull that out too. So that's how they get the different kind of metals out. Glass is broken down into small bits, and unfortunately we have virtually no way to recycle glass at this point when it's in that condition. Big problem, probably the biggest problem. And glass makes up 18% of the total flow. And it costs, right now, I think the MRF is paying $60 a ton to get rid of it. You use UV lights, that takes the PET plastics away from the 2 through 7. It's kind of like a big, you ever see the game Mousetrap? It's kind of like one of those things, the way it works. Do we stop?
Yeah. We watched a couple of YouTube videos on this. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And a lot of what's happening now, we can probably just go to the next one, actually, because that was just about it. The piece we didn't get was the end, which is the end product. So that's what goes through mixed recycling. That's not the only way to recycle, okay? Transfer stations are another real key in recycling, and SCARA actually holds the contract and pays to have almost everything that goes through your transfer station recycled. So scrap metal, mattress and box springs, you heard me talk about that producer responsibility for packaging. We enacted about 2 or 3 years ago, producer responsibility on mattress and box springs. We also have it for paint, which has been hugely successful. And that's where, in electronics, has been very, very successful as well. And that's where money is either exchanged at point of sale, or it's funded, in the case of electronics, by the electronics companies. It's put into a fund, and that money is used to recycle in the back end. So in the case of, like, say, the paint, you can take it into most transfer stations. Towns are a little bit different there. or some small amounts to retailers. You can bring it to any one of our hazardous waste collections, and about 80% of that paint is actually filtered, recycled, and reused. So it's been a huge success. These stats, it's a little small to see, but these actually is the financial benefit reaped by the SCARE towns on the right and the town of Groton in the last fiscal year. So you can see, including the subsidies at the bottom, but monetizing what it would cost to take care of all of those other items, it's about $800,000 a year benefit, which I would hope you would think is significant. That is our wood grinder. We purchased this last year. Massive machine. We grind all 12 towns. The mulch that comes in, we either provide the mulch back to the town. We've actually been hauling, last year we hauled 45,000 yards of mulch, which was more than our towns wanted to keep. And we ended up hauling it to Scott's, who would take it for free, but they wouldn't pay us for it, so we spent a couple of $100,000 just trucking it off. And the board has several months ago approved myself and another person on the staff to do a feasibility study for a food scrap composting operation for southeastern Connecticut. We just got back from a week's training in Cornell, so if you ever want to know how to rot something, you can ask me, because I can tell you now. I know all about how compost works. And so we're going to start looking for siting a facility in probably the early part of next year. Next one. We do 9 hazardous household waste collections a year. We just had one this past weekend in North Stonington. We're usually here in the first week of July, I believe it is, 1st or 2nd. We're in Flanders Road. And we take in massive quantities of stuff. We also do paper shredding, which has been incredibly successful. We fill almost 2 shredding trucks at every event we do. This is some of the information that we're putting out now, and you'll notice that when we talk about mixed recycling here, it's not just what's allowed, but we emphasize just as much what shouldn't go in, because about 12% of what goes in there ends up being sorted out, pulled to one side, and sent right back to the waste energy plant. It's a lot of double handling and expense, and it actually contaminates good recyclables. So, and then we have an app and we have our own app. We also have something on our website, and I believe links to the towns, called What Goes Where. And I'm going to let Becky talk about this, because this is her area. She's owned this from day one. It's pretty cool.
So it is a free app, and it's SCARA, or you can go to the website, or you can go to your town's website, and you can pick the town of Groton. And what it does is, so here is all of our towns. You would pick what town, and then, like, say you put shredded paper in. We tell you that it cannot go into your recycling. It would go into your trash, but we also give you other options. We try to give you several for each item. You can bring the shredded paper to one of our hazardous collections. There it is captured because it's an itemized item, and we would include it with our shredded paper, and then it would be recycled. So say if you pick something else, like he said, the mattresses, it would tell you that you need to bring that to your transfer station, and then if you click on where your transfer station is, it will also give you the information about permits, locations, hours, even their website, all from that application. So we have many hits. Groton has been one of our biggest because it is on your town's website. And a lot of people put in, you'd be surprised of all the stuff they're looking for. The plastic tags from your bread to the wrappers. We also talk about bricks because your transfer station doesn't take them. Well, we found a couple other places that will take them. So we try to give you other options, recyclable items. You could take them to Habitat, resale stores. And if for some reason there's something that you're not seeing, you would just suggest it. I update this every other day, and we'll tell you where you can take your trash. And there's also a fun game. It's a sorting game. There's 5 levels. So you just drag it to where it goes. And we've gotten a lot of information. And what's great about this application is every time someone goes on, it comes back, we have great data. We can tell you how many people are looking at these particular items. And if there's an item, then maybe we should increase our advertising or, focus on more of our education. So there's a great back of data on this application. And it is customized. You'll notice that Ledge Light is out there and one of the tall whaling ships. We worked with the company to have that, so it is a customized item. So I suggest, try it out.
Kind of a neat story with that. We, every year, we've been going to the Science Night at S.B. Butler. And one year, right after we got this, we thought, how cool would it be to get, a PC there and have the kids play the game in our booth. So we set it all up, and the kids were coming through. We had it all set up. We had a mouse there. And they all walked in there trying to touch the screen. And half of them had no idea what the mouse was. So it was an epic fail. But we tried.
We've modified
Modified
yeah.
it since then. So at any rate, that's the presentation questions you'd have. Yep.
I'm not really familiar with SCARA. Is it a for-profit company or is it a government entity?
We are a quasi-public entity. So we're not private, but it's complicated. We are sanctioned by the state of Connecticut, but we're owned by the towns. So we're a municipal authority.
So you have 12 towns? You have 12 towns?
Yes, we do, 12 of them.
And do the towns have to pay you a fee?
The only fees that the towns pay right now is a tipping fee for trash, which they've always paid from the get-go. I mean, that's basically how it was set up. The tipping fees in the early days got up as high as almost $100 a ton. A lot of things got reworked. That new contract for the sale of electricity came in. We were able to push those down. And we've been at 60 or below for about 15 years. We're at 58 currently. But that's really the only money that the town spends. I can tell you that we are under stress. We're looking to keep it there, but there's something that I'll be out talking to the towns really in the next couple of weeks, coming out to the town councils. We have just entered into a new waste disposal agreement with Wheelabrator up in Lisbon. It's going to help us reduce our costs to the tune of about $8.5 million over the next 10 years. We've been working on this deal for about 4 years, and that is going to allow us to extend our subsidies out a lot further. The other thing that's just happened, and isn't public knowledge, but it will be after tonight, is we've been renegotiating a recycling contract. All of our town's contracts expire in the next several months. They're 10-year contracts. They were very, very favorable when they were made. All the towns have been getting a $5 royalty per ton. At the same time that a ton of trash has lost all of its, or recycling has lost its value. So we're renegotiating a contract where we will pick up the cost for recycling, which is going to be considerable, almost as much as trash. So the towns aren't paying that.
But you've talked a lot tonight about a lot of all these different ways that you're reducing costs and you're adding new contracts. This is my first time hearing about this. I can't really connect the dots. So
Right.
How do you fund yourself?
As I said, we have a finite fund. It's set into reserves. Our board has voted on it. They've divided these reserves up into.
Well, where does it come from?
So I said early on, when we had ownership, while the bonds were in place, we had ownership, partial ownership of the facility. At the end of the bonds, when they were paid off, that facility the ownership reverted to Covanza, who is the operator. We own the land it sits on, they own the facility. While it was under the indenture, there was a contract for the sale of electricity that was very favorable. We took the excess funds from those contracts and invested it into reserves, which are now funding all of this. We're trying to be more and more better at what we do because those funds are finite. You know, we're in a good position to cover our contractual commitments to the towns as they exist now, but our goal is to be here or the authority, I won't be, but the authority will be here 30 years from now.
So
This trash isn't going
are
away.
you like the monopoly that all the 12 towns have to be in Skara, they can't be in another one? Is that how it's set up?
Well, it is actually kind of set up that way, but it's what I would call economic flow control, because if you were sending your trash somewhere else, you'd be spending probably $85 a ton instead of 58. So everybody wants to be with us because we're paying a third of the bill.
We're also covering all the expenses for the items at your transfer station.
Right.
We also pay for all the hazardous waste collections. Each collection runs about
And you get all this
20,000.
money from your reserves?
Yep.
Yep.
And then, you know, the other thing too is we do help all the towns. We have a municipality hazardous collection. So all your school, we had towns come to us and say, all my school chemicals at my high school are bad and I need to get rid of them. When they contacted a service, it was going to cost them $10,000. They came to us, they said, what can we do? So what we do is we send out a notice every year and we provide that service. So we have 12 towns that come in, so it's all about bulk and we get a better price and there's no cost to the towns. So we offer paper shredding for those events, the hazardous chemicals that are at schools, fire departments, police departments. The other thing that we offer is we go out to events. We go to schools. We do audits on your trash with the schools. Some schools aren't even, doing recycling the way it is. These are all free services. Ultimately, our mission is to reduce trash, promote recycling, and serve the 12 towns that we work for.
Which will allow our reserves to go longer. That's the whole idea, is to keep these reserves as long as we can. If we, and I can't quote exact numbers now because this is all still in a feasibility study, but for example, we dispose of about 135,000 tons of trash a year. Of that, organics, food waste, makes up about between 30 and 40%. That's the general number in any waste stream. If we're able to get a food scrap composting operation in place, we're likely going to be able to dispose of those organics through that process at a number closer to $35 to $40 a ton instead of $69, $70 a ton, which is what our new trash contract. So there are things that we're doing to try to save those reserves to allow them to go out further.
I just have one more question.
No, more is
Okay,
better.
if it turns out that you start separating the, what do you call it, food?
Food scraps.
Food scraps. Doesn't that, when it goes down the food chain, no pun intended, to my garbage getting picked up, isn't that going to make it more expensive for my trash hauler?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we're going to start this thing. In 2016, the state passed a statute for major producers of food waste, organic waste. The mandates that they have to send it to a organics facility if one is sited within 20 miles. Well, it turns out if we put something in anywhere in about a 20-mile band through the middle of the Skara territory, we can reach 20 miles anywhere. So where we're looking is really where the largest amount of this food waste is coming from, or from commercial entities and institutional. So you've got big schools, you've got colleges, you've got prisons, you've got hospitals, you've got tons and tons of restaurants all along the coast. So there's a very large portion isn't actually curbside. I think eventually we'd like to do curbside. A lot of places where they've done it very successfully, and it's been voluntary. It's not something they force on people, and it's worked very, very well. Worked very well.
Representative Richards?
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say we moved to Groton when we bought our first home, and one of the first things that we did was we found Skara and got a composting bin.
Yay.
So thank you for that. My question is regarding the glass, though. You mentioned that there's no option for recycling glass at this time. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's a real difficult commodity. Glass can be recycled, but it has to be very clean. And most of the glass that we produce has organics in it. Again, it's food, glass that was containing food or beverages, which is really, really hard to clean. in addition to the cleaning portion of it, it needs to be sorted. So brown, clear, green, all that needs to be separated out. And if it's like that, there are companies that can recycle it, possibly into food grade again, more than likely into something like fiberglass or some other product for the glass. The problem we have is that when we send anything through mixed recycling, it gets broken. As soon as it gets in this configured, stuff is broken. It ends up coming down, it's all mixed. It very typically has what we would call fines in it, which would be the bottle caps, it might be shredded paper, it could be all the small stuff. Medicine bottles, they're too small, they fall through, they end up in there. And the manufacturers, I should say the reproducers, who would try to transform that glass into a usable product, can't use it, it's just too dirty. So a lot of it gets landfilled. A lot of it's used for landfill cover underneath when they cap landfills. There's some places in the country that use it in septic systems. There's some places, and what looks to be very promising, is to use this as an aggregate in road projects, in asphalt. And there are a lot of places, particularly over in Europe, where they're doing a lot of that, but not here in the States. And I went to a conference about 6 months ago that was on how to use post-consumer recyclables in infrastructure projects. It was really interesting. There were a lot of different things going on. I won't get into them all. But glass is one of them that, is the technology there to use it? Yes, it is. Can you get it past the DOT? Never. They don't want it. They got their stats. They're not going to use it. And there wasn't a single state out of the 12 states that were at this conference that were doing it, including the ones that you'd think would be. So it's just a real tough thing. I had an interesting conversation earlier today with my counterpart over in Bristol, who had a meeting tonight with the group, and they're trying to figure out how to communicate recycling and that kind of thing. And he said, what do you tell people about glass? And I said, well, I tell them to recycle it, because it's the law. It's like, I'm not going to tell somebody to break the law. The state of Connecticut says you put it in a bin, we put it in a bin. But we really need to find beneficial uses for that. And for a lot of these other things that are in there can be reused, but in a lot of cases it's going to be more expensive to do it. But the flip side of that is look at the environmental impact. And I keep saying, that's where the real cost in this is, and it's a long-term cost, and like everything else, is it going to be more expensive? Probably is. So, but that's the case on glass. It's.
Is that glass even the deposit bottles? Does that problem extend to those?
It does, not to the same extent. There are some glass companies that will take the bottle-filled glass, because it is cleaner, it tends to be sorted more, but it's also just a fraction. We don't do a great job in the collection end of that. People don't like those machines very much. Every time I bring it up, people start yelling about it, and that's not something I'm involved with, but yeah, but if we could, yes.
Representative Rogers? Oh, sorry. Representative Rusk actually had her hand up first, sorry.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
My question is, single-use or single-stream recycling seems to be causing a lot of issues, both in cost and in sorting. Is there a push to go back to sorting from home to relieve some of those costs?
Well, the problem there is a financial one, because the haulers, by going to single stream, after they went to single stream, looking to save money, the next thing that they did is they went to the cart systems. And to do a separation, most of them aren't willing to go back to bins where you could do that properly. So the infrastructure is there for 90-gallon carts, and because they put it all into the bin at once, they can run half as many routes. In my case, I live in Ledyard. I have a 90-gallon recycle bin. They pick up every other week. The trash gets picked up every week, which doesn't, in my case, I fill that big one every 2 weeks, and my trash can maybe gets a kitchen bag in it, every 2 weeks. I mean, it's just, but, so it's been talked about a lot, but because of the infrastructure that the haulers use now, it's very unlikely that's going to happen.
Representative Rogers?
Thank you. This was so informative. Thank you so much for coming and presenting to us. I am a huge fan of the idea of a composting program in the town of Groton. And you mentioned that you went to a conference, and I wonder if there are any other towns that have a viable program that you're looking at as a model, and any that I know, like Northeast Academy has made some inroads just through their garden club. They're like putting their toe in the water, and I think integration with the program with the schools is a fantastic way to teach our children how to build lifelong.
No, completely agree. We actually do a fair amount of educational work with schools, and we built some recycle bins and things like that. And the thing that's tough in the schools is that kids graduate. So you start a program, and it's real hard to keep it going. I'll plug another program we have in a minute. To answer your question on the recycling, or on the composting, not in the state of Connecticut. There really isn't anybody doing it. The closest we come to a composting operation is in over, which town is it? It's in
Massachusetts.
No, it's in central Connecticut. There's a anaerobic digester that was built.
UConn do it? I thought UConn had.
They may have
composting.
one that's local, but as far as a large based, it's in Southington.
Yes.
And it's run by Quantum Biopower, and it has something like that could probably handle the amount of organics that we would generate, but it also costs about $40 million to build. Whereas a composting operation is probably a tenth of that. Yeah. So to answer your other question, have I seen it work? Yes, I have. There was the first system I saw was up in Syracuse, New York. It's actually the process that I'd very much like to emulate. They have a system of very large concrete bunkers, and they put the compost mixture in there, and they force air through it. It makes a compost twice as fast, and it controls all the leachate. It's a lot easier to control stormwater, and it almost completely controls odors, which is the big thing with composting. And it works very well up there, although most of what they're doing is commercial and institutional. A lot of big, several of the large grocery stores up there have large warehouses where they'll send over, a truckload of bread that was too old or something like that, and they process it. I have seen another one that's very successful up in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts, that was started at small scale. It was run by three guys that started it. They do a lot of curbside. They do a lot of schools. They make a premium compost that sells for about $10 a bag. If you go to Home Depot, you'll know the compost costs about $2 a bag. So it's a very nutrient-rich product that they generate. So it can be done, and they do a great job curbside with it. So yeah, it can be done, and I think we could do it. And when you look at, again, the environmental impact, coupled with the financial savings that we could have, it's kind of a no-brainer for us to look into it.
Representative Bordelon?
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is my second time seeing this presentation, and I picked up a little bit more information.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty scary because I feel that we are so far behind than I actually thought we actually were. The fact that when you purchase anything, it either usually comes in glass or plastic, and that the fact that glass is not able to really fully be properly recycled is alarming. But even further, looking at our industrial side of things and looking at the mechanics of the machines, it seems that we need some engineers to get out there and recreate a more robust way of recycling would be the answer. And I hope that there's talk of that so that these things can be
absolutely
more properly filtered. With that being said, from a local level, it's not even mandated in the town of Groton that you even recycle. So the problem is even larger. So maybe some of this stuff, yeah.
I can tell you it's mandated by the state.
But it's not enforced. So if I threw all my trash, if I threw all my trash in one bag, no one says anything. And with that being said as well, looking at our schools and stuff, I know when I went to Fitch, we were eating on styrofoam trays, and I believe the kids still do eat on styrofoam trays, and the cost of all of that, because styrofoam pretty much goes nowhere. And it just seems that we have a lot of work ahead of us. I mean, this was something that the reduce, reuse, recycle was enforced in my generation, and yet we're now here China rejects our stuff and we don't know what to do. So it's alarming. And even though we are recycling, we're sending it to other countries where we don't even know what they are doing with it.
Right.
I mean, so we think we're doing something here to benefit, but theoretically India or China or wherever could be putting it into the waterways. So it's actually frustrating that we may not actually even be recycling. So
Yes, we're experiencing quite an awakening, I would have to say. You know, on the food stuff, it's kind of interesting that there are a lot of things there that we can do. That's what I think is starting to happen now. You're starting to hear a lot. There was actually some legislation proposed on things like food trays in schools and things. We started a couple of new programs that are in their infancy, but I'm hoping that these things expand very quickly. We've brought in an outfit called Seaside Sustainability out of Gloucester, Mass. And it's a guy who was a high school teacher for about 20 years. He taught earth sciences, and he split off and started a nonprofit. And basically, he's created a curriculum called Green Scholars, and he's been extremely successful with this. He's taking it nationwide. He's had a number of schools go to the White House for Green Awards based on the work that they do. We kind of dabbled with it a little bit with Stonington because I know somebody in the administration over there, so it was a natural place for me to go. We also did a project in New London at the Magnet School, where they actually, the students actually brought in all the trash from a day, or the maintenance guys did, but they sorted it and weighed it to understand what it was that they were generating so they could make changes. My board has authorized me some grant money to utilize for that program. In their case, we want to go back in and say, okay, you've got this much plastic you're doing, what do you have to move the plastic? You need a couple of bins, we're going to buy you a couple of bins. The program in Stonington is even more interesting. That's the Green Scholars one. And it's actually a curriculum-based course where kids do project learning. So there's no books to it, but they come in and they work together in a group to create projects that they do that improve sustainability either within their community or within the school. And so we had about a dozen students, about 4 educators and a couple of the administrative people in, and we did a day-long class with them, and the energy was just off the charts. And essentially what they wanted to do, they looked at certain things that they could do. First place they went was the cafeteria, and they said, could we separate recyclables in our cafeteria? And the answer was, yes, you can, but you have to be standing there to make them do it. If you're not standing at the bin, it's not going to happen right. And they were like, great. And the person from the administration that was there said, well, they asked that person, well, do we get volunteer credit for this? Absolutely, you do. Amen. Whole bunch of them. So there's some things we could do, and I'm hoping to expand these programs. Again, the school year is really young, so everybody's busy getting their feet in the ground. But I am planning to come out and to Groton, like we did in Stonington, to see if maybe there's some things we can do. So,
Representative Chase?
Thank you.
Hi.
So if everyone does everything right and puts everything in the blue bin the way it needs to be, the glass is clean, you know, no shredded paper, everything, the truck comes and all of that goes in one truck. So that glass breaks. So is all of that contaminated now and it cannot be recycled?
In a mixed recycling system, probably. I mean, I wouldn't tell you otherwise. You know, if I can also say that we think we do a very good job with recycling, but we really don't. One thing we do is composition audits at Willimantic Waste. We're going to do another one in the next month or two, where we'll take probably 200 tons of scare recyclables from all the different towns. We clear out the whole system, we run it through, we weigh it, and we analyze what's in the back end. And so that we know how much of what commodities are in there, we understand what their values are, we understand the condition of things like the glass, and we take a look at that. When we take a look at the volume that we run through mixed recycling, I think most people think we recycle 25 or 30%. We recycle 25 or 30% if you add in all the stuff we do at the transfer stations. But through mixed recycling, it's about 12%. And studies have shown that recycled content in an average household waste stream is about 40%. So 4 out of 10 things probably should be going in the bin, and 1 out of 10 things are going in the bin based on the numbers that we've seen. So, but the glass is a problem. And we've made suggestions. We actually called several of my counterparts, and I had a meeting with the commissioner of DEEP last year. Just said, you got to figure this one out, and there's got to be some other way to do this. It just doesn't make sense.
So the way the system is set up now, they only can do those big bins that we have. So if in a perfect world we took the glass out and had a separate bin for that, the blue bin would be more likely to not be contaminated and could be recycled.
Taking glass out, I mean, and this is my opinion. You're hearing this from Dave, you're not hearing this from DEEP. Yeah, it would absolutely improve it. And we talked to him about it, and there was actually a town in western Connecticut that did a pilot project on that, where they had, they set up glass bins around town where people could take the glass there instead of putting it in mixed recycling. The product was absolutely better, but it just didn't go anywhere. And it was actually the haulers that pushed back. So
we'd have to have 3 bins instead of 2.
in Europe, they use 5.
So that leads into the other question. Someone had told me that there's a rumor going around Facebook that all of our recycling goes to Preston and gets burned.
No.
So that is
Absolutely
not the case?
false.
Okay.
That's Facebook
I know.
talking. It's not.
I know, but I
not
had to
people who are doing
ask.
the work talking. No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen, and it's, you know, we're incurring costs to make sure that recycling keeps happening. You know, we're hoping that there are some things that can improve. But to your point earlier, you know, you look at that machinery. Does it look antiquated? Yeah, it does. There's actually a lot of high tech in there. But another conference I went to, they were talking about plastics, and there was a group from I forget which particular kind of plastic it was, but there's one kind of plastic that's in that 3-to-7 mix that's not as popular, and they're trying to make it something that would get separated out from a MRF. So a MRF will bring in all the plastics. Typically, they'll put 1s and 2s, and then 3-to-7 go over here, and that all gets sold together. It's polypropylene. That's what it was. And polypropylene was part of it. And there was a growing industry that can use clean polypropylene. So they wanted to go back to the MRFs and say, do a positive sort of polypropylene. Well, to put that machinery in is going to cost $400,000, and it's at a time when the commodities are worth nothing, and these guys are losing their shirt. So where does that come from? You know, and that's where I think, you know, government could step in, big business could step in. You know, grants could be made available, low-interest loans could be made available. The other aspect is, you know, because the standards went up so high, the one way that these MRFs found that they could do a better job of sorting was slow their lines down, which just means operating costs go through the roof. So it's complicated. It really is. And it's going to take a few years to get fixed.
So if we
I'm a
could-
believer that it will.
So if we could figure out how to get glass out of the mix, we'd
It'd
be
be
a
a
little
good
bit
thing.
ahead of the game?
It would be a good thing, but I can tell you that we went to the state on it, and it fell on deaf ears immediately.
The other thing too is it's not just the glass that's the issue. It comes down to a thing of, is it recyclable versus does it go in my recycling? Just because you think it's recyclable, you have a lot of wish recycling. So they think that, okay, well, it's plastic. I mean, we've driven by and you see tiki torches. It's a wood product and it's steel. It's all recyclable, but it doesn't go in the cart. Tires can be recycled. Motor oil can be recycled, not in your cart. It's got to go to your transfer station. You know, so it's just trying to educate, you know, in the world that we're in right now, you have to, you know, you're worried about your job, you're worried about your kids, you're worried about this. Your life is so busy. The last thing you're really going to want to study is trash. So it just goes in the bin. So you get trash talkers like us, and who are really passionate about it. But now that it's starting to hit bottom line, and there's no place for it to go, people are waking up about it. And, you know, you have mountains of closed landfills, and they're always by water, and you can't do anything on them. You could put solar on them, but that's about it. So, you know, we have a lot to do. But it's not just SCARA, it's SCARA with our towns trying to set the example of doing the right thing.
Yeah, just like with the bag bans, that was a grassroots things that went up. That's exactly how that happened in the state. There were enough communities that really started pushing that envelope, and there was just enough conversation every year. And if you go up there when they went over this legislation, and you saw the number of school kids that came in there and sat and gave impassioned, very articulate speeches to these legislators to say, you know, what you're doing isn't right, and they changed it. But it's a bottom-up thing. It really is. So.
Let's take one last question from Representative Wells, and then we should move on unless there's a burning question that hasn't been asked yet.
Pass on the question. That'll be fine.
Can I ask, how do we put these bags in that?
Oh.
Just squish them.
There's a little corner, on the corner.
So you just, where the corner is, just gather it in.
Just pull it in.
It's like a stuff sack.
Yeah, like a stuffed sack and then
Yeah,
pull the
there you
cord.
go. Now stuff it in there.
I mean, this isn't something you use all the time, because it's not easy to fill when you're at the grocery store. But for me, if it's like I'm going to stop at the store and pick up 2 or 3 items, it's like, hey, I didn't bring my bag with me. I have this in my backpack, so it's a little something kind of fun.
So thank you so much, Mr.
You
Aldridge.
bet.
That was
You bet.
terrific, and Becky, that
Thank you.
was really informative. I think we can all agree that we learned a lot.
Becky's going to send me the presentation. That's good.
Perfect. So rounding to our next agenda item, we have a report from Mr. Burt.
Good evening.
Autumn just left.
First, the financials. Preliminary fund balance as of June 30th, 2019 is approximately $23 million, which is 18% of the FYE 2019 general fund adopted budget. General contingency budget was appropriated at $350,000. We're still at that amount. Capital reserve fund balance as of June 30th, 2019 is estimated at $1 million also. Just a note, next month's meeting I will be missing as I will be out of state. Bob will be here in my place, so if you have any really difficult questions for tonight, feel free to save them for next month. I won't mind. That'll be fine. I would like to say thanks to Mr. Perini and the volunteers for doing the stairway. That was great. If anybody else would like to volunteer or partner with the town, I'm wide open for anything like that. Give me a call. Me and a couple of council members did visit Quantum Biopower Digester a few weeks ago, by the way. It was interesting. It's very impressive there. We spent a couple hours there. Colonel Ledger's school project, those proposals, response to the RFP is due this Friday, so hopefully that'll be progressing soon. That is in the city and will include, the city will be part of the review process. They'll be involved. Groton Sale, looking at the library site for the Groton Sale. I've been working with the Department of Transportation on that request to sell the strip of land there, the right-of-way. Going well so far. They're still doing the review at the state, been getting them lots of information, but it's looking good so far. Plastics ordinance, the Conservation Commission will be holding an educational forum on September 26th from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Senior Center. The tax office has resumed its normal hours. They were opening later because of shortage of staff. It's back to their normal hours of 8:30 to 4:30. And the beautification committee is going to have a meeting next Monday seeking public input on areas that need improving or change. That meeting's Monday, September 23rd at 5:30 p.m. at the Senior Center here. So please attend. That's what I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Burt? Representative Katowski?
If we look at the minutes that we just approved, there were a lot of questions that were asked in June that have never been responded to. So unfortunately, you're not going to be here next month to respond to them.
Mine were all, every question asked, I sent an email out the next day.
Right, but the public doesn't get
Yeah,
to hear the answers.
And I don't have that email with me, unfortunately.
That's all right. Okay, so, as far as the Public Works vehicles study,
I got the draft 2 days ago,
okay?
and I'm still reviewing.
Right. And of course, my biggest pet peeve is the Mystic Educational Center. The other thing was that April 5th.
And just a note on that, I think something will be able to go public soon. The preferred developer is working with the state on a land transfer. That's got to go first, and once that's completed, which looks soon, then we can start having more public information.
Okay, and the other thing is that was in the minutes in two places. I asked the superintendent, and I also brought it up under other business, was the April 5th email that you sent us out regarding the Board of Ed, the Board of Ed grant money that needs to be approved by the RTM according to the town attorney. And I think you said that you were going to talk to the superintendent about it, and I was wondering the status of that.
I had resent to Dr. Grenier, and I think we touched base on it briefly. That's in their hands at this point.
Okay.
That's, their attorney has to look at it, or they have to review it, because we don't have authority over them.
But that was
Yeah.
April 5th.
Right, yeah. And I did email the next day and let people know I did
I know,
confer
but
with them, yeah.
Shouldn't
But-
there be an answer by,
Well, again, that's not my call, that's
Okay.
not my response to give.
one more thing?
Yeah,
If we had a meeting every month, I would only have a third of this.
I'm happy for all questions.
Yeah, okay.
I told you they'll save them for Bob.
I've been told that the enterprise zone around Electric Boat is losing $5 million a year. And I was wondering, number one, if that's true, and if maybe one of these meetings where we don't have a lot of business, we could get like a little presentation on enterprise zones, not TIF, enterprise zones.
And I don't think it's to that level with enterprise zones. I think it's manufacturing exemption, but Cindy's got all the information.
Okay.
So I could have her first present it to the finance committee and then
Oh, okay.
provide it here. She's put that, I've received that periodically.
Is that
It's been a
true,
few
though?
months, but it's mostly out there. It's easy to do.
But is it true?
Not with enterprise, I don't think it's to that level with the enterprise zone. Yeah, there's loss, but not to that level with the enterprise zone. I don't believe.
But are we losing money around Electric Boat?
Well, there's part of it is the enterprise zone gives you a tax break, or so I wouldn't say losing money. It's an it's supposed to be an investment to have a company here. So I don't want to say it's losing money. So, but the state hasn't reimbursed everything they should reimburse. So in that way, yes. I don't want to blame it on Electric Boat, though.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Burt. Dr. Grenier, I don't think we have anyone for economic development, right?
No, White House isn't here.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd begin, if everybody, has a handout gone around? Bruce, did you get one? Not yet, okay. Okay. I thought I'd begin just by giving you a very quick update. We had a really positive school opening this year. We started out on the vote with a convocation, and it was interesting. All the speakers, without us coordinating, really focused on the effort being made towards realizing Groton 2020, and the year really started out with some terrific energy. That afternoon, actually, we started one of our first formal consolidation efforts, we had the two middle schools meet midday for a picnic. And that was a first of lots of activities we're going to be doing this year, because by August, the school will be open and there will be one faculty, and that faculty needs to get together, obviously, to coordinate. And we've got plans for students, of course, and for parents, but that was the first, and it went really quite well. The next day, we started with 3 days of professional development. Next day, we had a Yale professor named Dr. Mark Brackett, who is an expert on social emotional learning. He really gave a very nice talk about establishing a emotionally safe learning environment for the children, and that went really quite well. The next thing, really, is part of the beginning of the school year. Right before school started, we were approved for the community eligibility provision, which allows our 3 Title I schools to provide a free, healthy breakfast and lunch. And the program, as you can imagine, has really been a huge success. Lots of participation. We needed to increase our participation to make sure we were maximizing the reimbursement from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But that's gone really well, and we are providing the meals to the children, and of course, we think that with proper nutrition, it's going to improve learning outcomes. You may have seen in the paper two staffing moves. We hired a young man, Ryan Cheney, Mr. Cheney, to be the principal of Northeast Academy. He was in North Stonington at the middle high school, but he is actually a long-term elementary school teacher. So he's thrilled to be back to elementary education, and he has really reached out to the faculty, and he's just delighted to be with the kids. So I think that's going in the right direction. And then on Friday, just before school started, we hired a principal, Mr. Ted Kelleher, and he actually joined us 5 days later, which was kind of a good break for us. He has been the principal of East Windsor High School for the last 8 years. Really comes with a lot of terrific experience, and so we're actually sharing him for the first month. The superintendent there and I kind of we're doing it 2 days on, 2 days off until the end of this month, and then, of course, he'll be at Fitch full time. Some of you went to the topping off ceremony, which was frankly an emotional event. The architects took the final beam and asked anyone who was part of the planning to come and sign the beam, and we did. And the crane picked up the beam and put it in its final place. And I think that building going up is just such a wonderful reminder that we are actually realizing the dream that was that, as some of the committee members said, they've been working on it for 12 years. I feel like I'm a newcomer. I've only been at it for 6 years, but it is, as if you've driven up Fort Hill, I expect you've seen this 4-story edifice, and so it's really coming along. It's on schedule, and so we anticipate opening last couple of days of August, opening Groton Middle School. And the last thing I'll say is we have 2 new features on our website. Actually, the name of the website is relatively new. It's now simply grotonschools.org. But if you go to grotonschools.org and you click on it, I give you a little directions here. You click on the web page and you bring up the Board of Ed. 2 things come up. One, Groton Board of Education YouTube channel. We are posting presentations that the board makes and others make. And the other thing on that page is Groton Public Schools 19 Media. you know, I expect that the schools present media on Channel 19, and there's a schedule. Well, what we've done now is we've made several of those things video on demand. So when you go to the calendar, actually there are two colors. I think one is green and one is blue. All the shows, like the board meetings, and plays and concerts and so forth, they are actually interactive. So you can go and click on whatever you wish to see. And if you want to see something that happened midway through a board meeting, for example, you can sort of scroll through that. So it's a really nice feature, and we're hoping to use more and more of that as time goes by. I made my presentation yesterday, and then I got your email today. So I know the moderator asked me to address a little bit about the work that was done this summer on the CIPs. The waterproofing of the beams at both Northeast Academy and at Catherine Kolnowski, that has been 95% completed. There's a little bit on the back, I think, is Catherine Kolnowski that we're just finishing up. We had actually one firm came in and did all the work. And the cost of that, we projected it to be $50,000 per school, came in at about $46,000 per school, so a little bit under budget. Two other CIPs were also passed. One is for the asbestos removal, which we didn't anticipate doing this summer at the high school. That will be performed next summer. And the work, we were hoping by this fall to get the design and bid specs out for the tennis courts. That work is going on. We believe the actual work of it's really going to be a total resurfacing, redoing of the tennis courts. That will take place not this fall, but next fall after the summer season takes place. So I think those were, and I'm...
Thank you, that was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Representative Mello Miller?
Good evening. Thanks, Dr. Grenier, for giving us a thorough explanation of what's been going on in the last couple of weeks. Going back to the Gulam beams, you said it's 95% completed. What else has to be completed on the beams?
I believe the back of Catherine Kolnowski, there are some beams on the opposite side of the building.
And when is that expected to be completed?
This week or so.
And so it can be completed during school?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then with the asbestos removal, was that always planned to happen next year?
Right.
Okay, so is there any harm right now in that asbestos now?
It is not yet friable, meaning it's not crumbling. And mostly it's in the glue, in the tiles. And the tiles themselves are intact. So we're good until next summer.
Okay, and then going back to the lead issue, where are we with the lead?
The lead, all the tests have been completed, and we've posted the results on the website, and so we are in good shape there. And we're working with the health department to get a regular schedule when the tests are going to be done.
And I can't imagine you have this number with you, but can you please get us an amount of how much this cost us for the lead, how much overall this was?
I think so. Yeah, I'd have to, well, I'll get back to you.
Okay, so can you write a note so that we can know, just for the sake of understanding how much, because this has been going on for a couple of years that we've been studying it and testing it, correct?
Right.
I believe it's taken, so
Yeah.
just so that we know
all
how
of the
much.
repairs were done in-house, so I'd have to figure that out.
Okay.
We haven't hired any contractors.
But just so.
Oh, I was going to say, we did pass a CIP of $50,000. It was
Right.
probably the longest discussion
Right.
we had
Right.
2 budgets ago, and I don't believe any of that was spent, right?
We actually sent it back.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, and then have you heard reports of humidity at Northeast Academy within the media center? Has there been any
No.
talk with that, of concerns
no.
of that?
No.
No,
Well, I've heard reports, yes, that there's no humidity.
that there's
Well,
no
not
human,
no humidity, but there's
that there's
low,
no,
low humidity, well controlled.
okay, so there's no,
There's no problem.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Representative Bordelon?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Dr. Grenier, for updating us. I also agree that the topping off ceremony was quite the event, and what that means to a lot of people who are from this town. I only can speak for myself, but it means the chance for equality education in this town, where all students will have the fair opportunity to have everything that one school has under one roof, with one PTO advocating for the whole town and making sure funds are allocated for remedial support. So I am very excited about that. Just looking at the free and reduced lunch numbers and the Title I programs, I'm also excited that finally we are servicing the students that are in the highest need areas that do need free and reduced lunch. And I hope that in the other districts where students also are receiving free and reduced lunch, these programs will be extended to them. I'm curious, though, if you could kind of let us know, maybe not today, take a note, the numbers at the high school, because I'm kind of looking at the district numbers as a whole, looking at the 3 Title I schools, looking at some of the Title I kids that do attend Cutler and all the elementary schools that all feed into the one high school. I really just think that at Fitch High School, where you have adolescents and teens that are developing rapidly and very athletically, the free and reduced could be a huge success up there to make sure that we're tapping into all our resources. Northeast Academy, I know you did a presentation at one of your meetings. I'm not sure if it was Town Council or Board of Ed, I apologize. But you did talk about a report that has come out that you're looking through, and you started making modifications. You put in some new thermostats, and you had also, there's more action plans that you were going to be following up. So at some point, I wish if you could explain those a little bit. Nancy tapped on the water once again at the meeting.
No pun intended.
Yeah. At the Board of Ed meeting, you did state, when I had asked that what's our follow-up plan to make sure that those levels stay where they need to be, and as you just stated, you did say that you would be looking into how you're going to continue to monitor that, so I do appreciate you continuing that. I'm a firm believer in making sure that with our diversity in this town being quite high, I don't have the exact number in front of me, we've hired 2 new administrators, and I'm not seeing diversity, and when I mean diversity, I mean of all backgrounds and social classes, as well as gender identity. So we just hired 2 Caucasian men as administrators in our town, which is wonderful, but we have a huge lack of minorities that represent the community that we're actually serving. And so I hope that the minority recruiting, I want qualified first, obviously, but I hope that we're tapping into those proper channels, because I know a lot of qualified women and minorities, even of all backgrounds, not just speaking African American, Indian, whatever you may be, that's is not being served in our district. So I would hope that we're doing that, and your candidate process is, I hope that someone's overseeing that. Your SBAC scores, I know they're out. I'm hoping that there'll be a presentation coming to us to let us know where we stand.
I wanted to show them tonight because I think you'll be extremely pleased. But the board hasn't seen them yet.
Okay.
But I don't want to tantalize you too much.
And with those scores, I'm hoping that
they are as strong as they've ever been.
Okay, great. I'd love to see that presentation. And with those scores, I'm hoping in the sections of the district that are underserved and need the support to close those achievement gaps. I'm hoping that now that you have the scores, here we are in September, that the action plan will be to take the funds that we allocated in the budget to make sure that the troops are in the school, ready on hand, remedial and math support that is needed, because there is a lack still today of that. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Grenier. One question I have to ask, with your free breakfast, it'd be interesting if you could do a longitudinal study of the children who are receiving that to see how performance is enhanced or not with that addition of nutrition. So I think that would be a nice study, maybe publishable. Anyway.
From one PhD to another, I hear you.
Representative Rogers?
Just piggybacking on that, actually, I'm wondering if you know the percentage of Groton students overall who are participating in the free and reduced breakfast and/or lunch program.
Oh, I thought you were going to say percentage of Groton students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch.
Oh, well,
That's
so
about-
eligible
that's
versus
about 47.
participating. Oh,
District-wide is about 47.
okay.
At Colchester, it is about 78. At Catherine Conant, they're mid-60s and West Side mid-60s. When you have that high, once you get up in the mid-60s, what the government pays you, the subsidy for the meal, covers everybody's meal. Below that amount, then somebody has to pick up the cost of the non-free and reduced meals, and that would be, we actually estimated that it's a large number.
So these 3 schools have crossed that threshold.
These 3 schools, right. So there's about 550. There's a little bit, maybe 1,200 children who are in those schools. So about a quarter. I'm just winging the math here, but about that. Okay. Obviously, all the kids at Westside, 515, all the kids at Colchester, and all the kids at Catherine Kanowski. So about 800, about 1,300 kids.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Representative Whitney?
Thank you. Just this is on? Yeah. I have a
It's
few
on.
points. One of them, I just found out this week that maybe there might be a shortage at Catherine K in some of the instruments they lend out to the students, the first-time students. It might just be worth checking into that because maybe there's attrition over time.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one.
And then
Just like Catherine Kolnowski.
Yeah. I heard about clarinets, but it might be broader than that. And then another one about, we're talking about the school lunches, and I think Groton's had a very progressive view on this and supporting students, and it's wonderful. One thing I did notice, however, when we got our letter home this year is that there's still the concept in the policy of an oops lunch. Like if you're over, and this wouldn't be for these schools that we're talking about, but
right.
if you're over, say, like $14 or $15, then they give you a PBJ.
No.
My guess is that doesn't actually happen.
No.
But
the board just changed the policy.
Just when?
Well, first of all, there was never a time in Groton that I'm aware of that any child got anything other than a lunch.
Yeah, that was my belief too. Yeah.
And the board, it was in a policy that they did, and the board steadfastly rejected that. So they changed the policy. So now, if a child, if the account doesn't have sufficient money in it, the child still gets the meal. There are no exceptions.
That's great. So they'll update the letters for next year then.
Does it say that in the letter?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. Thanks for telling me.
I was surprised to see it because it just is counter to my
don't tell the board.
with.
They'll be really mad because they just changed the policy. And
well,
so,
I emailed them.
Well,
too.
thank you.
and then the other thing is you brought up the issue about the humidity in Northeast Academy, but where do we stand in the broader issue of air quality there?
Well, we actually, two things. There will be a CIP because we got the whole engineering study. But during the summer, we actually work with our HVAC control system, and we realized, thanks to some of their engineers, that there's a way we can use the current system with some modifications to the programming, the computer programming, that will dehumidify the air. So we instituted that. We've actually instituted that at both schools, Catherine Konowski and Northeast Academy, because they have the same system. And it has, if the director of maintenance was here, he wouldn't want me to say it has always, the threshold is 60. Mold cannot grow under 60% humidity. And so obviously we try to keep it below that. The vast majority of the time, there may have been some very humid days, and for example, at Northeast Academy where there's a camp, a lot of people are coming and going, the door is open, but we have humidistats in two or three places now in the building, and it's been very successful. Certainly while school is in session, it has been very successful. And as I said, no reports of mold or in either school.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Representative Merritt?
In referencing Catherine Kanaski and Northeast Academy, I would like to make a note that I hope with the new middle school, that piece of architecture out in front has been looked at.
It has.
I looked at Kanaski School, and quite frankly, I'll be open about it, I wasn't impressed at all. And I can see where the repairs are going with this stuff.
Right. The architects, well, that was never part of the plan, but we have paid attention to all the lessons that we learned over the last several years about humidity and so forth, and so all of those are being implemented. The mistakes are being avoided in Groton Middle School, and we're in the middle of the design for the two elementaries. But I can assure you there will be no wooden beams that need to be
Thank you.
waterproofed.
Representative Washington, did you have your hand up? No, Representative McDermott.
Thank you. Mike, NASA is running another mission to Mars. And
I was wondering if it was you or Bruce M. Okay.
And
all right, yes.
Since I'm involved somewhat in astronomy, they're requesting that they're going to deploy another rover. They've done Curiosity and Opportunity. Those are probably the most well-known ones. But they were named by children, and what they're doing is requesting that schools will provide them with some sort of name. Good. So that, maybe Groton would be one of those, but it would certainly generate some interest, I think, in the school system.
No question. I'll share that with the science staff.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, I want to thank you for coming here tonight and updating us.
You're welcome.
Thanks. We'll see you next month. Bye. All right, so this brings us to our liaison reports, if there are any. Representative McDermott, do you have anything to report from the Parks and Recreation?
No meetings, no reports. I will have one for the next meeting.
Thank you. Representative Melendez, do you have anything for the Town Council? No. Representative Bordelon, do you have anything from the Board of Ed? No. Representative Wells, do you have anything from the Golf Advisory Council?
Well, mercifully, we were off in July and August, and there were no meetings in July and August, so this is the first meeting since June. They had exceptionally good revenue in July and August. In fact, the fiscal year to date, which cover those 2 months, was 8% over the previous year and 21% higher than the average of the previous 4 years, which is good news because the bad weather over in the off season really wiped out the fund balance that they'd been slowly accumulating over a decade. It takes, it doesn't take many bad weekends to really interfere with the performance. They've more than tripled the number of under 35 members, which in salary has gone from 7 to 24, where they were hoping for 14 members, and they got 24. And a lot of credit goes to the new community outreach coordinator, Jessica Patterson. There was some questions about course conditions, forward tee maintenance and so on. They're short one maintenance person left, and they've said they have a problem recruiting young people to work in the summer, seasonal employees. They haven't been turned, so they're a little short-handed. Jenny Schofield, the state coordinator for the state and national register, historic register, visited the course, and very confident that the course could make it onto the state and the national registers as a historic recreational facility. Unfortunately, the person she met with was not available, so there's really not much in the way of details about her visit. They're going to do the bunker repairs that we authorized this year, will be done this year, and they are just, will be wrapping up soon the work on the Plant Street entrance to the clubhouse, landscaping and so on. It'll be quite nice, and that should be good. On the things that aren't happening quite so quickly, you'll be pleased to know that the Comfort Station has been scratched. They've given up on it, and they're going to install the facilities in one of the outbuildings, so it'll be considerably simpler. So they've finally given up on trying to get somebody to do it. And, Roscoe's looking amazed. He was going to do that. But not to disappoint, we have, let's see, I'm looking over, they had 3 calls of complaint about men urinating in the trees. This is from people across the road from the course, so I'm assuming that these characters are down there and they're looking over their shoulder and feeling they're out of sight for other golfers and have no idea that someone in their living room is watching them. And, well, they could, if they knew that, I suppose, keep a golf ball in their pocket and then say, "I found it," and then head back to the course. But perhaps next time they will take some photos and they can decide, exactly what it is they observed. Maybe just a mere suspicion. And let's see, that'll do it. Thank you. Ross.
Do you have a question, Representative Merritt?
Yes. How's the addition?
The what?
The repairs out in front.
At the Plant Street entrance?
Yeah.
Let's see, my notes here say October 11th will be finished.
How does it look?
Well, I didn't look at it. I saw they're going to clean it up. There's going to be all that crazy parking. There's going to be 2 handicap parking spaces, and it will just be a pass-through.
I understand it was an override, but that was because they found stuff underneath that wasn't avoided. We couldn't avoid it.
There was no there.
But it came out okay then?
Yeah, it looks good. I was down there and saw it.
Thank you.
Take a drive by. I think October 11th they're going to finish. They got the landscaping to do.
Paving, yes.
But it'll be a lot tidier than it was before.
Thank you very much. All right, so that's it for our liaison reports. I don't believe there are any committee reports, but if I'm mistaken, could a chair please raise your hand? No. That brings us to other business. Is there any items that members would like to raise? The town clerk would like to raise an item of business.
Okay, well, last night, the town council introduced an ordinance to amend ordinance 286, which was the ordinance that abolished the zoning commission and combined the planning and zoning commission. So that's to reduce the membership from 7 to 5 regular members, and that's going to have a public hearing on October 1st. I'm supposed to tell you, so I did.
Hearing on October 1st, did you say?
Yes.
Thank you.
You'll get the notice before it's put in the paper.
Okay. Any other items to bring before us? Seeing none, I would seek a motion to adjourn. You're all super quiet on this. Boy, usually 10 people have their hands raised. Representative Oliver had a motion. It was seconded by Representative Adams. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I guess we are adjourned at 9:30. Thank you.